there's a big difference between being in motion and actually moving forward. If you've been grinding, saying yes to all the things, but still feel off, this one's for you. Hi, I'm Sam, and this is the second edition of Locker Talk, where we talk about career strategy and really what it takes to help you move forward in your career. The truth is that you won't drift into the career you actually want. It's not going to be some series of accidental yeses, accidental decisions, and one day you're like, "Wow, I can't believe I ended up here." At some point, you've got to take the driver's seat. And for most mid-career professionals that I talk to, they're not drifting because they've stopped trying. They're stuck because they've been really running hard in the wrong direction. They've built careers by being the go-to, the reliable one, the fixer, and every yes along the way, it made sense until it didn't, until they hit some crossroad where they stopped, they looked around and said, how the hell did I get here? Now they're really good at something, but that no longer feels good for them. And they feel off, but they don't know how to get back into alignment because they've never had to design their own career plays before. If that sounds familiar, then yeah, you're not alone. You're not alone. I just got an email in my inbox on LinkedIn yesterday that was somebody telling me exactly this. I hear it all the time. So what does that look like in action, right? I wrote a blog this week and talked a bit about one of my experiences when I had gone through 10 different reorganizations, I think seven different bosses, and four promotions, all in a really short amount of time. It was like 40 some months or whatever that I uh, I went through just these drastic changes. It felt like I was being dragged from one large reorganization to another, world upended every single time, having to readjust to different bosses, different things over and over and over again. And I was along for the ride. It was like, yes, I can do this. Yes, we can figure this out. Yes, we can make this happen. Yes, I'm so excited to learn this new thing that I've never heard about before. And eventually one day I looked around and I said, oh my gosh, like how did I get here? And so I made a choice to then change to a different role internally. And then again, as soon as I did that, more reorganizations, more changes, more, just complete chaos. I had a period of time where I didn't have a boss for 6 months. I was just had a placeholder. They were like, yeah, we'll get somebody in here eventually. And it never happened. So I had to lead my own direction with my team. I had to figure out how to work with other people, how to work with a group that I had been ripped out of, how to work with groups that, had no idea what we were doing or why we were doing it or what was happening. It was utter chaos. And then after all of that came what was my final reorganization, an 11th reorganization in 3.5 years. And with that one came the choice. You can either take this package and leave, or you can find a new job internally. So I did what everyone does probably when that happens, is I panicked. I talked to everybody under the sun about, my situation. What should I do? What was the right move for me? I found another role that I could have taken internally. All these things where it's like, okay, I'm now sitting at this divergent path. I have two clear options here. Do I go or do I stay? And staying felt like a lot of the same journey. It felt like choosing another yes, another, okay, I can make this work. Okay, the situation has been thrust upon me, and so now I've got to figure it out. But it was in all this chaos and in probably what felt like a huge betrayal. I had worked at the company I'd worked for a very long time, and I had poured blood, sweat, tears, pieces of me into this and into the career and into the people that I loved. And I just decided, no, this was not what I want. I don't want to be drug along. I don't want to be pulled from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, even though it was a choice, even though I could make the decision, right, to where I wanted to land and things like that. It just didn't feel like me choosing. It felt like me reacting instead of me taking action. And so I had 6 weeks to decide, but I gave myself a deadline because I knew lamenting over this and trying to figure all of this out was never going to work for me. I needed to make a decision and then move from a position of power, right? Something that I had control over in a situation that felt largely out of my control. So I gave myself a week to decide, and I chose to leave. That led me to this path of entrepreneurship and seeing, can I make this happen? Can I give this a go? And will this really work if I were to try it? And that decision felt good. It felt empowering. It was definitely scary, but it felt like mine. But then I had to put my money where my mouth was. And I knew that if I wanted to go down this journey, one of the things that I really needed was a legitimate certification, working for me and making sure that I had, the right training so that I could, ethically help people correctly, even though I had had, 15 years of training in my career leading to this, and I had done a lot of this type of work in the past. I really wanted to make sure that I was doing that with a framework, with a background that made sense. And so I invested 5 grand into a coaching, speaking, and training program. I did the Maxwell Leadership program, which is a great program if anybody's ever interested. Um, and that's where it really felt like I was making the choice, right? I invested what felt like a large sum of money. I'd never invested that much money in my self-development before during this period of my career. The last time I invested money like that was in college. Um, but this was one where it's like, all right, I'm going to do this. But then I had to invest the time. And that was the other big thing, right? I had to go through all of the training. It was largely self-led with some in-person like capstone to it at the end. But I had to schedule the time. I had to have the discipline. I had to make the choice day in and day out. I had to choose to go through this program every single day rather than 1,000 different other paths that I could be taking. And it was in that constant choice that I really realized this was me taking the steering wheel. This was me taking control of my future in a way that I had really never done before. And I mean, I'll tell you, it was one of the best decisions and one of the best things that ever happened to me. I had a lot of people after I went through this thing that said, "Oh, I knew this person who got laid off, this person who got laid off," and they, eventually told me it was the best thing that ever happened to them. And you'll never ever have me agree with that sentiment that being laid off is the best thing to ever happen to somebody. But sometimes we come across these moments in our lives that are the turning point. They are the crossroads. They are the thing that force us to stop for a moment and make a decision. And it's what we do in that moment. It's the actions that we take. It's the commitments that we make that become the best things that ever happened to us. Going through 11 reorganizations and having all of this chaos thrown on me was not the best thing that ever happened to me. What I did with every single one of those changes and the paths that I chose, and then eventually the big change that I chose, and all those little choices that came after, are one of the best things that's ever happened to me in my career. And so I think that if I was sitting down with somebody and saying, hey, it's not this huge pivot necessarily that you need to make, because sometimes that's not where you're at, right? Sometimes it's just sitting in intentionality. You don't really need a 5-year plan. I know that's like the most classic interview question, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? You don't need that. And honestly, like, so much is going to change in the next 5 years of your life that hopefully you're a different person 5 years from now than you are today. Hopefully you're 5 years better. And so you make 5 years wiser of choices along the way. So you don't need a 5-year plan. You just need one clear decision, one thing that puts you in the driver's seat of your career and of your life, really. So this week's full blog, I do have 5 intentional plays you can start running, and things to really getting you moving in the right direction and getting you moving with intention and with decision. But here's one thing that you can think about right now. And the question to ask yourself is, if I were steering with intention, not reacting out of habit, what's one thing I would do differently this week? That's it. Don't overthink it. Just answer it, right? What is one thing you would do differently this week if you were doing and steering your career with intention? Just answer it and then go do something about it. Make the choice, make the commitment. When I say commitment, I mean get in action about doing something with this thought, with this question, with the answer that you have for yourself. And hey, if you're done drifting and you would like somebody to hold your hand and walk through a system and all that sort of good stuff, I do have a career reboot boot camp coming up. I've got a sneak peek of kind of what that experience sort of looks like next week in a live session. So links to that will be in the show notes. But I really, really want to encourage you to find that way to take a moment to ask yourself the question and then to take the next steps. You don't need to start over. And honestly, you really can't start over in life. The only thing you can do is just start on purpose. And you can do that starting right now, starting with what you do and starting with how you move from this point on, moving with intention. So thanks for tuning in to Locker Talk. If this hit home for you, subscribe to the Locker Room. Come join us in our community. You'll get lots of tips weekly. You'll get notifications when things like this come out. And let's get you back in the game. So until next time, put down the popcorn and get in the game.